WGBH TV Boston presents Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett, and you see I'm out here picking sweet peas again. Well, you haven't been able to see into this far into the greenhouse because there's been so many other plants in the way. But I want to tell you that these have been growing beautifully back here in a nice, cool corner of the greenhouse with plenty of sunshine. This is the kind of a situation they like indoors, and of course, they like a cool, sunny situation outdoors too. And next spring, I'm going to plant some sweet peas in this garden, and I hope that you will plant some in your garden too. A very, very lovely, fragrant cut flower to use all through the year. Well, while I'm at this end of the greenhouse, I'd like to show you this particular plant. This is called a Sprengeri fern. It's a type of asparagus, and like all asparagus, has both male and female flowers. But of course, since this plant has red berries on it, you can see that this is a female plant. Now, these berries are preceded by small white flowers, which are very, very fragrant, and these little berries can be picked now at this stage and planted, and you'll have new plants from the asparagus fern. That's one other way. Of course, you've seen me divide them in the past. Well, now today we're going to talk about orchids as houseplants, and then I'm going to talk also about the more of the vegetables I'm going to plant in my garden this year. And in the plant clinic, I have a Rieger begonia, which has been resting and is now about to start a new career. Well, on our progress report today, let me begin with these cherry tomatoes. These little round fellows, small ones, just the right size for salad. You know, we've been growing them in full sunshine, a nice warm temperature, about 70 degrees. We give them something to a little food every week or two, and it shows that you can grow them inside. You can't probably grow them in your house unless you put them on a sunny windowsill, because tomatoes need a great deal of sunshine in order to do well. Well, right here, I have a hyacinth. You notice I have some flower pots over the top of it, so I call it my little dunce cap, to allow this stem to grow up about 4 inches tall before exposing this plant to the light completely. Now it is ready to go into the light. The flower stem will elongate till it's about 8 inches tall and blossom. This was a dark pink one called Amsterdam, and like the other spring flowering bulbs I'm going to show you today, this one was planted last October in ordinary soil, put in a trench in the garden. We covered the trench over with a thick layer of leaves and then put plastic over the top so that it would keep the ground from freezing. Now, we go out there anytime during the winter, pull these plants out from their protection, then bring them in here. They think spring isn't coming until April. Well, fooling them. We're going to have springtime and midwinter by bringing these bulbs into a warm temperature. Well, another one here that's on that same category is a little crocus. Now, there were 4 crocus bulbs planted in here. They haven't quite opened yet, but these are the little tunics, the sheaths that cover those stems coming out of the ground. This is one that's white with purple stripes called Pickwick, and it will be out very soon. And then another one of these cool seeking bulbs are the tulips, a variety called Kaiser Kroon, now 3 to 4 inches tall. Again, was one that spent several months outdoors in the trench, stayed cool and moist, and it formed roots. See the roots coming right through the bottom of the pot. Now we know that this is ready to bring in here, give springtime temperatures, and we'll have flowers on here in about 6 weeks. Well, while we're talking about bulbs, I have two others right beside me. This is the Easter lily, which was planted 6 weeks ago and is now out of the ground and growing. Again, an Easter lily in your home wants about 65 degrees at night, the brightest, sunniest windowsill you have. Don't feed it too much until the plant gets up 5 or 6 inches tall, and then give it a light feeding every couple of weeks with a houseplant fertilizer. Another tender bulb is the oxalis, which we planted 7 weeks ago. Now, the foliage looks as though it might be a clover, but actually this has clusters of lovely pink flowers. There are also lavender and white ones and yellow ones. Do very, very well in the house. Give it sunshine, keep the soil fairly moist, Don't feed it too often, not over once every month or 6 weeks, or it'll grow too fast. Oh, we have, let me see, the next thing I want to show you is this little one right here. This is an Easter cactus, which I brought into the greenhouse here about a month ago, and in handling, a stem got broken off. Someone just set it here in some damp sand, and look, we have a plant well rooted. The little fellow is even going to blossom for us. You know, it's pretty hard to say anything bad about a plant which tries as much as that to grow. While we're at these indoor plants, I'd like you to see this pansy. This is a winter flowering pansy, sometimes called a climbing pansy, because it will grow 3 feet tall or more, has nice long stems for cutting, but it blossoms in the wintertime when ordinary pansies won't come. Well, this one, a yellow with the brown spots on it, like a little tiger face, is typical, but there are white ones and pink ones and all of the ordinary pansy shades. Back here I have the first blossom on the calla lily, and that is something I really want you to notice. This is a bulbous plant from South Africa, very fragrant and long lasting, and so easy to grow if you give it warm temperatures, one temperature that you call comfortable, bright sunshine, and do as I do and set the pot in a saucer that contains water at all times. In South Africa, these plants grow in the ditches, and the pigs use them as food, and I think that's pretty sacrilegious. Well, finally, I want to get to this fuchsia. This is the one called Dark Eyes. You see the blossoms on it here, sort of a pink and orchid combination. This is one which I have been growing to train as a standard, that is, as a little tree fuchsia. I've let this stem go right on up here and staked it and taken off all the side branches until it has now reached about 30 inches. And this is where I'm going to cut the tip off and force the side branches to go. And you notice what there is involved in here. Simply take your thumbnail and pinch the tip off like that. Now, when I spread those leaves apart, you notice that I already have 2 branches coming. Now, as those branches go on from there, we'll keep pinching out the tops and have a nice crown of flowers for next summer. I only want to talk about this rather straggly looking plant called the Ficus nivita, or Indian laurel. Early last fall, this plant was brought into the greenhouse. Someone had had it on the Cape Cod during the summer and had it apparently somewhere close to the ocean, because not only was the beach sand all over it, but there was incrustations of salt, and the plant was really and truly on its last legs. I doubted for a while as to whether I could even save it. So what did I do? First of all, I cut out the dead wood. I washed not only the leaves, but also the roots and got the old salt out of it, repotted it in Jiffy Mix without any additional fertilizer. And this is the important thing. The plant was very, very weak. It's as though you were giving someone who just came out of an operation a meat and potato diet when they should have chicken soup. And so we gave that chicken soup diet just no fertilizer at all, except what was in the mix itself. Now, I have fine new growth coming on it. All of these leaves are new and dark green and very healthy. But now we come to the point of training this plant into a pretty shape. Because it has been through such a traumatic experience, it lost a lot of branches and such, it's now awkward shaped. So I'm going to simply cut this back. Now, this may seem like a pretty severe thing to do, but this is the way to treat this plant at this time. Not much at this moment to look at, but right from the sides of this stem and this stem and this one will come what in horticulture is called adventitious buds. They'll break right through the bark and will form a great new crown of foliage and new branches on the top of that plant. Now, I should say one more thing. I told you about not overfeeding this particular plant. Probably the best way to kill a houseplant is to overwater it, and the next best way to kill it is to overfeed it, especially in the midwinter. It's much better to do with no fertilizer than to give it to them too regularly. Usually, foliage plants especially are killed with kindness of overfeeding. Often a person will feed them every 2 weeks or every month. I advise feeding them every 4 months or every 6 months. Just that's all they can assimilate under those poor light conditions inside our homes. Well, now I come to what I think is the nicest part of this show, and that is we talk about orchids as houseplants. And I should say, first of all, that many of these orchids, which you see right here, were grown by Mrs. Evelyn Cronin in Wellesley, Mass. And she didn't grow them in the greenhouse. She grew them in her home. And not only did she grow them in her home, but she grew them under lights. So if you think that you can't grow orchids, that orchids are difficult or mysterious, you should reconsider, because they are very easy to grow, and they certainly do respond with some of the most beautiful blooms known to horticulture. Well, first of all, let's begin about something of their past. The orchids that we grow, either in greenhouses or in the home, are jungle plants. Most of these plants come either from the Central and South America and Caribbean island jungles, or they come from the jungles of Malaysia or Southeast Asia. In these situations, there are two general types of orchids. Now, this is one that is called an epiphyte, and an epiphyte means an air plant. Its roots cling to the bark of the tree, and they don't suck anything out of the tree itself. They simply take moisture out of the air. So an epiphyte is an air plant, and therefore we pot it up in a mixture which is mostly bark of trees. This happens to be fir bark, a good potting media for most orchids. This one is a type of Cattleya orchid. And next to it, I have this little fellow, which is a terrestrial orchid. And this one is called a Paphiopedilum. Sometimes you might think of this as a slipper type, or almost like a lady slipper type. You see the various petals on it, and this beautiful coloration and those tiny hairs growing on the flower. Interestingly enough, this blossom will surely last for 2 months and maybe 3 months on the plant. One thing against orchids is they usually blossom one time a year, sometimes blossom more than once, usually once a year, so you have to wait a long time before you get another blossom from the same plant. So the moral to that is to have a number of different kinds of orchids so that you'll always have some in bloom. Orchids generally, since they come from the jungle, they like moisture, but not an overabundance. They like good drainage along with moisture. They like very little plant food. You can imagine if a plant hanging from the bark of a tree is not going to get very much in fertilizer, and they don't, if overfeeding again is very critical with them. The thing they do like is high humidity. Now in the home, I like to just lay a shallow tray out, put some pebbles in it, and keep a half an inch of water in the bottom of the pebbles, and simply set the pots on the pebbles. That moisture evaporating will come right up around the plants and provide the humidity that they need. Now I'm going to go through a few of these plants and tell you what they are. This is a Cattleya hybrid, actually a cross between a Cattleya and a Laelia, a small type, sometimes called a cocktail type of orchid. Handsome little thing. I've told you about this little lady slipper type. Across here we have more lady slipper types. This one with a little yellow and the white on it. Very, very tough. Up here is a great one. This is called the moth orchid, or Phalaenopsis. This is the kind that the brides and bridesmaids like to have in their bouquets. Very, very long lasting, and they like heat, and therefore that makes them easy to grow in the house. And then down here on my bench I have this little fellow. This is called a Sophronitis. This is one from the jungle. And see, it's a real miniature. You can see how small it is, with bright scarlet flowers. This one has been crossed with a great big orchids, and which do not normally come in red. And the plant breeders have ended up with big red ones as well as little red ones. But while I'm talking about Cattleya orchids, which I mentioned previously, I'll show you this particular Cattleya orchid here. These flowers I picked in my own greenhouse this morning of a variety called Centinella. I bought the plant for $3 24 years ago. It's blossomed ever since. There's no lifespan to an orchid. I've divided this plant and given away pieces to other friends of mine. There's another one called the reed stem epidendrum. Again, it's one which blossoms 12 months of the year. Uh, there are over 25,000 different kinds of wild orchids, so you just don't have to wonder whether or not you're going to find something that will please you. Where do you buy orchids? Well, I'll tell you. If you look in the back of a magazine such as Horticulture or Plants Alive or Flower Grower, you'll find advertisements of orchid growers who sell the plants to amateurs. But probably the best source that I know is the Bulletin of the American Orchid Society, which is published in Cambridge, Massachusetts. There are hundreds of growers listed in each issue, monthly issue of the American Orchid Society Bulletin. Finally, at this time of year, many orchid societies are having shows. And you should watch for an orchid show. It doesn't cost much to go in, and there will be members of the society there to tell you how to care for the plants, explain those little fine points that you want to ask about. A great plant, once you get bitten by the orchid bug, well, you'll be an orchid fancier yourself. Now, last week I started to talk about the vegetables that I'm going to plant in my own garden this year, and I mentioned that although there are hundreds of various companies to order from, I'm going to get some of my seeds from Harris, some from Stokes, and some from Burpees. And there are, as I say, many ones, and also there are hundreds of other varieties of vegetables that are good, which I just don't have room for in my garden. But let me tell you the ones that I personally am going to order. Now, last week I finished up on the carrots. Now we'll talk about cauliflower. Before I tell you the varieties, let me give you this one tip. You must, if you see in the catalog it says 75 days or 85 days, to that add 4 to 6 weeks for planting your seed, because the catalog time, it doesn't relate to seed, but it relates to setting out a plant 4 to 6 inches tall in your garden. So you have to add that extra time on to make enough time to get maturity. Well, for a white cauliflower, I'm going to grow that All-America winner again, called Snow Crown Hybrid. Really a great one. For a purple cauliflower, I'm going to grow that early purple head. Takes a long time to mature. I don't know why they put the word early in it, because it takes about twice as long as most cauliflowers. For celery, I'm going to plant a Summer Pascal. Now, celery, again, has to be planted 10 to 12 weeks indoors, before your outdoor temperatures stay above 55 degrees. Otherwise, your celery will go to seed instead of making just stalks. For Swiss chard, I'm planting one called Large White Rib, and I'm planting that because the leaves are smooth. Those crinkle-leaved ones, just an aphid will walk a mile to make his home inside those little crinkles. For sweet corn, there are so many good varieties to choose from. But let me make this one point to you on sweet corn. I like to plant 4 or 5 different types, that is, of stages of maturity. Very early, mid-season, main season, and late corn, which will mature anywhere from, say, 60 or 65 days up to 100 days. Plant them all at the same time in blocks of 4 rows right down the garden, with the smallest ones, the earliest ones, on the south side of the garden. As they are picked, you cut the stalks off and plant something else in it. Well, here we go. The extra early ones, 2 yellow varieties I recommend are called Early V and Butter V. That's the V is spelled V-double-E on that. For early varieties, I choose a yellow called Spring Gold, and a bicolor, that's the yellow and white kernels together, called Sprite. For the mid-season, I'm going to plant that great Butter and Sugar, which has been a favorite for so many years. That's a bicolor, and Tasty V is a yellow one. Now, in the main season, 2 yellow ones which are useful all throughout the country, and that's called Seneca Chief, is a good one and wonderful. And then for the late ones, which will take 95 to 100 days to mature, a pure white corn called Silver Queen Hybrid, and then a Lionite Chief and then another late one called Sweet Sue, which is a bicolor. Oh, we get to cucumbers. Look on your cucumbers to find those that are resistant to scab, mosaic, and mildew. We like Setacoy, Market Moor hybrid, and Burpless hybrid. Well, in my plant clinic today, I have a Rieger Begonia. And this Rieger Begonia performed all summer long, blossomed for 3 or 4 months. It is now growing off to one side. None of this foliage is growing anymore, but it's beginning to make new growth down at the base of the plant. Well, let me show you what I'm going to expect this plant to do for me. Here we have another Rieger Begonia in blossom. So you see here we have, this is my promise from this plant. What I shall do on this one, this old one, is to reach down here in the bottom and remember that all begonias are very, very brittle. So you have to handle them rather carefully. Reach down there and cut away those old stems and get rid of those entirely. Now what we have left is a fairly decent young plant. And I'll move these things out of my way a minute. We're going to knock this right out of the pot. Investigate. Now you see this is solid roots from last year, and these roots are no longer functional, and this soil has lost all of its nutrients. There's no need to set this plant into a bigger pot. What we're doing now is called paring away this old soil. The soil has used up most of its good, but there is at the base of this plant a small bulb, and it's from here that this new plant will grow again. So we'll get rid of the old soil, take that same flower pot right back again. We'll set this Rieger Begonia in here. These Riegers, by the way, come in many shades of red, yellow, pink, and orange. They were developed using the tuberous rooted begonia as one of the parents. The developer was a German plantsman, and he has contributed one of the finest plants, new plants to horticulture that have been known. Now, this plant now needs only a drink of water. It likes cool temperatures and bright sunshine at this time of year. In the summertime, the begonia likes partial shade and will blossom for, as I say, for 3 or 4 months at a time, and you certainly can't ask more of a plant than that. Now, I'd like to suggest if you have questions on gardening, that you send them to Crockett's Victory Garden, WGBH, Boston 02134. And I would like to answer a few questions today. This first one comes from Muriel Charpentier, who has tried to grow some seedlings under light. Dear Jim, my sunny windowsill space is limited. Can vegetable seedlings be started under artificial light? Yes, they can. And what's the most effective way to keep them warm enough to sprout? Because I turn my thermostat down to 55 in the daytime. Well, I would say cover the whole thing over with a sheet of plastic, let's say something like a bag from the cleaners, to hold some of the heat of the lamps in, and they will grow, and they do beautifully under light. You get some sturdy plants. Better than on a windowsill that doesn't get sufficient light. By the way, keep those lights on about 16 hours a day on your plants. Mrs. J.M. Rogers asks, is it possible to propagate a holly tree? Can a twig be rooted like a pussy willow can in water? No, you'd have to root it in sand. And let me show you one which I rooted 3 years ago. Here's a holly tree, 3 years old. When your nurseryman asks you what seems to be a lot of money for a holly tree that's 5 feet tall, would you please estimate how many years it took him to grow that plant? This is a very slow growing, a very delightful tree, but you can't grow one overnight. By the way, you can grow them from seeds. The trick on it is, well, I should say the obstacle is, it takes 14 months from the time you plant the seeds before the first seedlings come out of the ground, and that's quite a wait in itself. David Klinkowski would like to know about radishes. I planted 3 weeks ago some radish seeds that grew to be 3 inches tall. They were thin and later bent over and died. Why? Probably not enough light. They need full sunshine and not cool enough. They would like to be 50 degrees perhaps, and I think it must have been warmer than that where your plants were. Why don't you wait until spring? They're very, very hardy, light, cool temperatures. You can plant them in your garden the first breath of spring if you don't have enough sunshine to grow them indoors. Martha Smith says, my pink cyclamen is in full bloom now. How should I take care of the bulb when it is done? Haven't had much luck in the past. Well, one of my neighbors called a while ago, or last summer, and said, gee, Jim, cyclamen that I asked you about I've had now for 8 years. I put it under the grapevine every summer. Well, that's what you should do. Put it out in the shade during the summertime. Excuse me. In midsummer, repot it into fresh soil. Then in the fall, bring it into the house and give it a good sunny windowsill. During this winter time, shade in the summertime. They'll live for many, many years. Lucinda Winslow says, I have been growing citrus seeds into little treelets for several years. Suddenly this year we've had an attack of scale which took over the lemon and grapefruit trees rapidly and is now attacking the avocado. What can I do? How did I get the scale into the house? Well, I've said again and again, when you get a houseplant given to you or that you purchased, quarantine it until you're really sure that it doesn't have a bug on it. Apparently, some plant that you brought into the house had the scale. Now, this wintertime, what you could use for scale is that tedious process of alcohol in a swab. In the summertime, you can use malathion spray will do it. I have a tip for today, and that has to do with the cleaning the foliage of houseplants. You know how it is in the winter when the house is all closed up, the leaves are apt to get dusty. Frankly, I'm going to tell you what I use, and that's just plain water, pure water. If you put olive oil on the leaves, you'll kill them. I don't like to put shiny substances on them. I don't want my plants to look as though they're made of vinyl. Water is the greatest thing. It will clean the pores. The plants will be healthy, and they'll look great. Just one more tip from Crockett's Victory Garden. I hope you enjoy the program every week.